phrases before certain sentences, the English paragraph would sound terribly choppy. Similarly, in the process of translating this particular paragraph, we notice that original sentences are at times much longer than an average sentence in English. In order that our translation may be properly understood, we made the decision to split up in many of the run-ons into a series of concise and effectual sentences. I'm just going through a little fast, so please bear with me. Alternatively, at another place, we merged Premchand's somewhat fragmented description of the scene of a village and its surroundings through the use of the semicolon and conjunction. Naturally, for a translation to be a successful retelling and also a truly independent text from the original, similar changes in transitions, sentence shape, and even paragraph structure must take place whenever appropriate. Yet, we must remind the reader that to produce a catalogue of all such structural changes made to the original text in our translation of Burial's Rod is a task beyond the scope of this paper. An achievable aim of this commentary, however, is to show in other way how the translation cannibalizes material from the original text and then innovatively retells or reconstitutes in English. One example in our penchant of creating metaphors in English to match the vivid language, at times also metaphorical, used by Premchand in the text, the narrator recounts the incident of Ghisu attending the morning breakfast at a wedding of a magnanimous landlord. In the original text, Premchand wrote to Ghisu, the memory of the event was still fresh. To capture freshness in the translation, we find an implicit metaphor in the sentence. Indeed, it was an incident that still tasted fresh to him. We feel this type of cannibalism of our source text and creative retelling becomes particularly apt when you observe that shortly after the narrator speaks about the incident, Ghisu himself goes into a rant about the amazing food that he had eaten at that wedding. As a matter of fact, the Premchand text, Ghisu says, "Now, what can I say about how much flavor I received from that food?" This quote. While this sentence adequately expresses that the experience was an overwhelming one for Ghisu, we contended that this emotion could be even better articulated if the flavors are allowed more of an agency in the description. To that end, we employed personification, a type of metaphor, fortunate, like Ashokji gave me this opportunity to say something. Christy Merrill teaching and research Literature Fellowship and co-published by Katha, New Delhi and Fordham University Press, New York, and won the 2012 A.K. Ramanujan Award for Translation from the Association of Asian Studies. Her first scholarly monograph, Riddles of Belonging, India in Translation and Other Tales of Possessions, that is also published from New York Fordham University Press in 2009, explored the theoretical issues attending in translating the humorous oral-based writers such as Detha. It was written in part while on fellowship at the Society of Humanities at Cornell University during 2004 and 5. She spent 2013 and 14 school year in India on a National Endowment for the Humanities, American Institute of Indian Studies Senior Fellowship, researching her latest book, Project Genres of Real Life, Mediating Stories of Injustice Across Languages. I'm not, as I said, I have 4 pages of her introduction. I'm just going to skip some of the work she has done. She's long list of accomplished publications. Merrill's other articles on translation, post-colonialism, and the study of human rights have appeared most recently in Blackwell's Companion to Translation Studies, Routledge's Handbook of Translation Studies, Boundary 2, Teaching Literary Text in Translation and Biography, and the forthcoming in the Oxford History of Literary Translation in English. She has been invited to give lectures around the world on South Asian literature in translation, post-colonial theory, and a study of human rights, including US, China, I'm not going to name all the universities, country, India, of course, and many other places. In 2014, she has been serving on the Modern Language Association's Translation Prize Selection Committee, and before that served on the Executive Committee for the MLS Translation Discussion Group, including as President and Secretary in 2012 and 2011, respectively. There is a long list of publications you can see on the website. I'm just simply about her areas of research. Is widely work on Indian literature, focusing on Rajasthani and Hindi. So her areas of research are South Asian literature, and just combining all together, not reading the whole text. South Asian literature, her areas of research is on South Asian literature, post-colonial theory, critical practice and theory of translation, narrative humor, Hindi-Urdu literary history and language politics, oral literature and performance studies, the stories of Rajasthani writer, which is Vijay Dan Deta, authorship and the history of intellectual property rights, epistemological inquiries through Web 2.0, issues of human rights, genres of literary nonfiction such as essays, travel writing, ethnography, and testimony. With this, I would like to welcome Professor Christy Merrill. Please give a big hand to her.
I'm just going to make sure that everyone can hear me. And please, if I start to drift off and you can't hear me, if you just raise your hand and let me know. Sometimes I start to get focused on the page, and I will try not to do that. So thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. It's very nice to see Dr. Varsi again. And I want to thank you again for this invitation. I think what you're doing at the Hindi Sangam Foundation is wonderful, especially because I think a lot of us academics want to make sure that the work we do is relevant, and it's really helpful to have such a good collaboration. I'm really impressed by what I've seen already. I want to thank you for the chance to take part in that. So today what I'm trying to do is make some of the questions I'm asking recently, put that in conversation with some of the things you've been talking about. So what I'm trying to do is go back and read some Hindi literary history through my current project to think about what I think of the future of Hindi literature, which when I was given that task, I thought that there was no way that I could take this on, but in the process of thinking about these issues, I came up with some new things I don't think I ever would have if I hadn't been given this task. So again, thank you for that as well. So you may have seen my abstract. I'm interested in asking what attracts multilingual speakers and even non-native speakers to write in Hindi? What unique possibilities does the language offer today? And how might future writers take advantage of these features? Rather than talking about my own experiences as a non-native speaker coming to Hindi, as you may have expected, I will hazard a few possible answers to these questions by focusing on the example of Kaushalya Besantri's 1999 life story, Dohra Abhishap. This is something I'm currently translating as part of a larger project on literary work devoted to issues of human rights. In this case, Besantri's Jivan Ki Katha is groundbreaking as an account that has insisted on a perspective both explicitly feminist and self-consciously Dalit, as her title, Dohra Abhishap, suggests. So what I did was I collected some quotations, and I'll read the quotations only in Hindi, and I will not translate them, which is very unusual for me. So she indicates her purpose for writing in the dedication itself. मेरे जीवन की कथा माँ और बाबा के समर्पित, जिन्होंने गरीबी, अंधविश्वास और जातीय प्रताड़नाओं से लड़ते हुए हम सब बहनों को शिक्षित करके जीने का रास्ता दिखाया. I would like to draw your attention in particular to the way she constructs a plural feminine subject with the first person hum sab behnon. This seems a significant detail here, since her effort to recount her experiences in the past also signals a grammar for future lives of democratic. In part because in Besantri's work, this transgenerational grammatical effort reached across a range of constituencies. She certainly saw her writing as being part of a bigger political project, Dalit feminist activism, that forged what Benedict Anderson has called an imagined community in his book, Imagined Communities. And I'm going to spend a little time going over, just extracting some things from Anderson's work and then thinking about how that applies here. The nation is imagined, he explained, in that members of even the smallest nations will never know most of their fellow members, meet them, or even hear of them, yet in the minds of each lives the image of their communion, close quote. And these citizens imagine this as a community because, as he says, quote, regardless of the actual inequality and exploitation that may prevail in each, the nation is always conceived of as a deep, horizontal comradeship. Anderson argues that print capital that an imagined community must settle on a single, standardized language in order to forge a strong sense of unity. We can look back on the history of Hindi literature and see that early proponents of Hindi and Devanagari as a national language were convinced by the one nation, one language model that was so prevalent in the European context in particular. But Besantri's account shows another possible way of conceiving of the nation, as including people who do not necessarily speak the dominant language, are not from the dominant class, and are not perhaps even literate. So I'm going to read the opening of her introduction a little bit. मैं अतीत की यादों के साथ अपना जीवन जी रही थी, अपने भोगे हुए यथार्थ को शब्दों में उतारने का द्वंद्व की पीड़ों में जीवन के 68 वर्ष बीत गए। एक बार नागपुर अपने मायका गई थी, वहाँ मराठी में लिखा हुआ कुमुद पावड़े द्वारा लिया गया माँ का साक्षात्कार अस्मिता दर्श त्रैमासिक में पढ़ने को मिला। कुमुद पावड़े और मेरा उनसे व्यक्तिगत परिचय नहीं था। मैं सिर्फ इतना जानती थी कि वे मराठी भाषा की प्रसिद्ध लेखक थे और नागपुर के मारिस कॉलेज में संस्कृत पढ़ाती है। मैं उनसे मिलने उनके निवास स्थान पर गई। वहीं पर उनकी छोटी बहन नलिनी सोमकुमार से भी भेंट हुई। वे भी बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर कॉलेज में मराठी भाषा पढ़ाती हैं। वे भी लेखक है। खान पान के दौरान सामाजिक मुद्दों पर चर्चा होती रही। वे दोनों भी दलित समाज की होने के नाते उन्होंने मुझसे कहा कि आप काफ़ी समय पहले स्कूल कॉलेज में पढ़ी हैं, तब उस वक्त का आम सामाजिक जीवन और दलित समाज का रवैया कैसा रहा? आपको सामाजिक जीवन में जो अनुभव आए उन्हें आप लिखती क्यों नहीं? क्योंकि उस वक्त इन्हीं गिनी दलित लड़कियां पढ़ती थी और सामाजिक कार्यों में भी बहुत कम पढ़ी लिखी लड़कियां नजर आती थी। This group of activists is taking advantage of print capitalism to remind members of the nation of the, quote, deep horizontal comradeship, even if there has been little to none in the past or even present. The scene recalls what Anderson observes in his 4th chapter of Imagined Communities. As literacy increased, it became easier to arouse public support for the nation, with the masses discovering a new glory in the print elevation of languages they had spoken humbly all along. I want to emphasize this hierarchy since it's one we see played out in many examples of Hindi literature, including the ones I'm quoting today. Printed literature is considered elevated, high status, and the spoken word humble, low status. Interestingly, the most vibrant examples in the Hindi literary tradition find ways of incorporating oral elements into printed texts in such a way that revitalizes the language and democratizes it. How? In his discussion of language hierarchies, Anderson then goes on to cite the insights of Hobsbawm on the French Revolution, in which liberty, equality, fraternity slogan was repeated, whose liberty, equality, fraternity slogan was repeated so often by Dr. Ambedkar. Anderson suggests that the actual experience of the movement only became a model for others after it had been made real via the printed page. So this is Anderson now, right, speaking. The overwhelming and bewildering concatenation of events experienced by its makers and its victims became a thing with its own name, the French Revolution. Like a vast, shapeless rock worn to a rounded boulder by countless drops of water, the experience was shaped by millions of printed words into a concept on the printed page, and in due course into a model. Why it broke out, what it aimed for, why it succeeded or failed became subjects for endless polemics on the parts of friends and foes, but of its itness, no one ever had much doubt. Similarly, the 20th and 21st century Dalit movement for liberty, equality, fraternity in India has been shaped by millions of printed words from experiences into a concept on the printed page, and at this point the itness of the movement can no longer be doubted. What I am interested in today is not only the fact of these individual experiences that have added up to form a collective it, that is, the Andolan, but the ways this Andolan has found a way to work across languages and between oral and written forms. We see some evidence of this in Basantri's introduction as she goes on to explain her decision to write. So this is just the same paragraph I was just reading from before. फिर भी मैंने लिखने में बहुत देर कर दी, कई बार संकल्प किया और छोड़ दिया. मराठी की प्रसिद्ध लेखिका उर्मिला पवार और मीनाक्षी मून बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर के आंदोलन में जुड़ी महलों पर किताब लिख रही थी. वे दिल्ली मेरा साक्षात्कार लेने आई थी. उन्हें भी कहा कि आप अपने अनुभव लिखें. फिर मैंने निश्चय कर लिया लिखने का. In this introduction, she offers less insight into her choice to write in Hindi and not her native tongue in Marathi. She defends the decision in a very cursory way. मातृभाषा मराठी होते हुए हिंदी में लिखने का प्रयोजन क्यों? क्योंकि हिंदी में दलित महलों के आत्मकथाओं साहित्य का अभाव है, जिसकी शुरुआत में मैं भी हिस्सा होना चाहती हूँ. The word shuruat is important, for it allows us to think more carefully about what kind of beginning this Jivan Ki Katha signifies. Other Dalit feminist writers, such as Anita Bharti, for example, see Baisantri as foundational in their own work. But I would like to turn the question around and ask instead, what kind of Hindi makes this possible? Or rather, what possibilities does Baisantri's writing create in Hindi? I should mention that months into my research in Delhi on fellowship last year, I discovered that Baisantri was an avid translator of fellow Dalit feminist work from Marathi into Hindi, and I tripped across this short story by Urmila Pawar, as she just referred to here, that was published in Hunt's. And I was told she translated a lot more than she ever actually published, which is sad. So as a translator and translation theorist, I'm interested in understanding her various writings as contributions to Hindi via other languages in a way that's inclusive and democratic. That is, I hope to argue that an overtly political project such as Baisantri's is not only helped by the status of Hindi as a national language, but also, and most importantly, that this political project turned literary endeavor helps strengthen the status of Hindi. How exactly? Several chapters later, we get a very different glimpse into the strength of the elevation of printed Hindi in a chapter where the printed word is commodity. Somehow the family has managed to send Kausalya to school despite the hardship on the family, including negotiating the increasing gap between the uneducated parents and their educated children. And she thinks more about the character of her father that made this possible, especially as she watches him try to negotiate for a fairer wage after years of working at a bakery and getting paid the same low rate and working extraordinary hours. वे बहुत सहनशील व्यक्ति थे, this is her father, परंतु माँ को बेकरी वाली का रवैया अखरता था. माँ ने खुद बेकरी वाले के पास जाकर पैसा बढ़ाने के लिए कहा, परंतु वो नहीं मानी. तब माँ ने उसी के सामने बाबा का हाथ पकड़कर बेकरी के बाहर उनके खींचा और बेकरी वाले से कहा, तुम मेरे पति से इतना काम करवाती हो और उनकी कदर भी नहीं करती. कई वर्षों से एक पैसा भी नहीं बढ़ाया. अब मैं यहाँ नौकरी नहीं करने दूंगी. जहाँ हम भूखे ही रहे, परंतु यहाँ काम नहीं करने दूंगी. Okay, so that's the end of the Ma. And then the narrator, Baisantri, says, बाबा ने बेकरी की नौकरी छोड़ दी और कबाड़ी का धंधा करने लगे. वे अंग्रेजी के घर से बहुत सुंदर बोलते थे. टिन के डिब्बे, अंग्रेजी हिंदी के मासिक पत्रिकाएं आदि लाकर बेचते थे. माँ की पगार से ही घर चलता था. बाबा के सामान की कभी अच्छी बिक्री होती थी, कभी नहीं. बस भाजी का खर्च निकल आता था. बाबा रोज सवेरे ही बंगलों के चक्कर लगाते और सामान इकट्ठा कर बाजार में दुकान सजाते. रोज कहीं न कहीं बाजार लगता था. हिंदी मराठी के मासिक में बाबा के कबाड़ में से उठाकर पढ़ती थी। हिंदी की प्रसिद्ध कहानी मैंने उन दिनों ऐसी ही किसी पुरानी मासिक में पढ़ी थी। उसका नाम था उसने कहा था. To me, this is a wonderful metaphor that a Hindi short story, in this case Chandradhara Sharma Guleri's Usne Kaha Tha, is literally fished out of the rubbish piles of the elite by an illiterate scavenger and passed along unknowingly to his daughter, who then appreciates it for something beyond its symbolic value as being of the elevated classes. How can we read the Hindi archive differently through this scene? It's perhaps coincidental that this story is considered by some to be the first modern short story in Hindi. What kind of shuruat does it represent? It was first published in 1915 in Saraswati and is a fictionalized memoir of a Punjabi Sikh soldier from Amritsar daydreaming of a girl back in India. The recollected scenes of a prior daily life, of a prior innocence, are interspersed with and at odds with the terrible realities of the Great War being fought in the trenches of Europe. So this is just a small scene. You can kind of see what's going on with the men in the trenches. But I want you to hear the kind of language, because that's really what I'm interested in. Udmiut